In the ancient texts that shaped our understanding of angels, demons, and the supernatural world, there exists a story that has captivated believers and scholars for millennia. It's a tale of rebellion, forbidden knowledge, and cosmic judgment. A story that bridges heaven and earth in the most disturbing way imaginable. This is the story of the Watchers. To understand the Watchers, we must first turn to the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Here, in just 4 verses, the Bible presents one of its most mysterious passages. When men began to multiply on earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw how beautiful the daughters of man were, and so they took for their wives as many of them as they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not remain in man forever, since he is but flesh. His days shall comprise 120 years. At that time, the Nephilim appeared on earth, after the sons of God had intercourse with the daughters of man, who bore them sons. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown." Who were these sons of God? What were the Nephilim? And why does this brief account immediately precede God's decision to flood the entire earth? The canonical Bible leaves these questions largely unanswered. But there exists an ancient Jewish text, written between 300 and 100 BCE, that provides extraordinary detail about this event. It's called the Book of Enoch, and it tells us that the sons of God were angels called the Watchers. The Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish apocalyptic text attributed to Enoch, the 7th generation from Adam and the great-grandfather of Noah. While not included in most modern Bibles, it was considered scripture by early Christians and is still part of the biblical canon in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The first section of this book, called the Book of the Watchers, provides a detailed expansion of that mysterious Genesis passage. According to Franz Enoch, God originally sent 200 angels to earth with a specific mission to watch over humanity. These were the Watchers, celestial beings assigned to observe and protect mankind. But something went terribly wrong. The leader of these angels was named Shemihaza, whose name means "my name has seen," a reference to constantly watching God. The irony is profound. The one appointed to watch would himself be watched and judged by the Almighty. Shemihaza looked upon the daughters of men and found them beautiful. Consumed by lust, he conceived a plan, but he feared acting alone. So he gathered the other watchers and said, "I fear you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." The angels responded by making a pact, a binding oath sworn on Mount Hermon. All 200 would descend together, take human wives, and share equally in whatever consequences followed. They bound themselves by mutual curses, ensuring that none could back out. And then they fell. The Book of Enoch preserves the names of the chief leaders among these fallen angels. There were 20 chiefs of tens, each commanding 10 angels. Besides Shemihaza, the text names Artekoph as second in command, Ramashel as third, and Kokabel as fourth. Other prominent leaders included Armumahel, Ramal, Daniel, Zikel, Barakel, and Asael. Each of these names carries meaning in Hebrew or Aramaic, often incorporating references to God, which makes their rebellion all the more tragic. These were beings created to serve the Almighty, yet they chose to serve themselves. The Watchers descended to Mount Hermon and took human women as wives. But their sin went far beyond forbidden relationships. These angels began teaching humanity knowledge that was never meant for mortal minds. Each Watcher seemed to specialize in corrupting humanity in different ways, and the Book of Enoch carefully records their individual crimes. Azazel stands out as perhaps the most notorious of the Watchers. He taught humans how to forge weapons of war, swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. He revealed the art of metallurgy, showing them how to extract and work metals from the earth. But Azazel's corruption extended beyond warfare. He taught the making of bracelets and ornaments, the use of antimony for beautifying the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones and colouring tinctures. In essence, Azazel taught humanity both how to kill and how to seduce, how to make war and how to inflame lust. Semjaza, whose name means name of Aza, taught enchantments and root cuttings. To ancient readers, this clearly meant witchcraft and sorcery, the manipulation of spiritual forces through spells and potions. He showed humans how to use plants not for healing, but for magical purposes, for love potions and curses. Amaros, whose name may mean cursed one, taught humanity how to resolve or break enchantments. In other words, he taught counter-magic, creating an entire system of occult practice where humans would cast spells and then need other spells to undo them, trapping humanity in an endless cycle of spiritual manipulation. Barakijal, meaning lightning of God, taught astrology. He showed humans how to read the stars not to understand God's creation, but to divine the future and make decisions based on celestial movements rather than divine guidance. Kokabal, whose name means Star of God, taught the constellations, furthering this corruption of astronomical knowledge into astrological divination. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of the clouds, what we might call weather prediction or meteorology. But in the ancient context, this meant reading omens in cloud formations. Arachiel taught the signs of the earth, interpreting natural phenomena as portents. Shamsiel, son of God, taught the signs of the sun, while Sariel, command of God, taught the course of the moon. Each of these angels took legitimate knowledge of God's creation and twisted it into tools for divination and fortune-telling. To modern ears, some of this sounds innocent, even beneficial. Isn't knowledge of astronomy and medicine a good thing? But the early church fathers who read the Book of Enoch understood these teachings differently. Irenaeus, an early Christian theologian, interpreted these lessons as the discovery of love potions, spells of bewitchment, and all sorcery and idolatry hateful to God. This wasn't science, it was sorcery. The Watchers weren't uplifting humanity, they were corrupting it, teaching humans to manipulate spiritual forces, practice divination, and engage in occult arts that would separate them from God. The connection to other biblical passages becomes clear when we understand what the Watchers were doing. In Deuteronomy 18, verses 10 through 12, God explicitly forbids these very practices. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. The Watchers were teaching humanity the very practices that God would later condemn through Moses. They were preemptively corrupting humanity, ensuring that when God gave his law, humans would already be deeply entrenched in forbidden practices. But the corruption didn't end with forbidden knowledge. The union between the Watchers and human women produced offspring, the Nephilim. The Book of Enoch describes these beings as giants standing 300 cubits tall, that's 450 feet, taller than a 40-story building. These weren't just large humans, they were monsters. The text tells us, "And they became pregnant, and they bore great giants who consumed all the acquisitions of men. When men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh, and drink the blood." The Nephilim were cannibals, consuming not just animals but humans, and eventually even each other. The earth became a place of violence, bloodshed, and horror. Humanity cried out, and their cry went up to heaven. This connects directly to the Noahic covenant established after the flood. In Genesis chapter 9, verses 4 through 6, God tells Noah, "But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal. And from each human being too, I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made mankind." This prohibition against consuming blood and against murder wasn't arbitrary. It was a direct response to the practices of the Nephilim, who had consumed blood and murdered humans freely. God was establishing boundaries that the pre-flood world had catastrophically violated. The Nephilim appear again in the biblical narrative in Numbers 13, when the Israelite spies scout the Promised Land. They report, "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Enoch come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This raises a troubling question. If the Nephilim were destroyed in the flood, how could they appear again? Some scholars suggest that the corruption happened twice, that some Watchers fell both before and after the flood. Others propose that the Nephilim genetics somehow survived through Noah's family line, perhaps through his sons' wives. Still others argue that the spies were using Nephilim as a general term for giants, not necessarily the literal offspring of angels. Regardless of the explanation, the presence of giants in Canaan connects the pre-flood world to the world Israel would conquer, suggesting that the spiritual warfare that began with the Watchers continued throughout biblical history. 4 archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, brought humanity's cry before God. The Almighty's response was swift and severe. God commanded Raphael, "Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein. Place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire." This punishment of Azazel connects to the Day of Atonement ritual described in Leviticus 16. On this holiest day of the Jewish year, the high priest would take 2 goats. One would be sacrificed to the Lord, but the other, the scapegoat, would have the sins of Israel confessed over it, and then it would be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. For centuries, scholars debated what Azazel meant in this passage. Some thought it was simply a description of the wilderness. But the Book of Enoch suggests something far more profound. The scapegoat was being sent symbolically to the imprisoned fallen angel, as if to say, "These sins belong to you, Azazel. You taught humanity to sin, and now these sins are returned to you." The Day of Atonement wasn't just about cleansing Israel, it was about reversing the corruption the Watchers had introduced. The other Watchers received similar fates, bound in a place called Tartarus, a section of the underworld, where they would remain in darkness until the final judgment. But God's judgment extended to their offspring as well. The Nephilim would be destroyed, first by turning on each other in cannibalistic fury, and then by the great flood that would cleanse the earth. Before the flood, God sent Uriel to warn Noah. "Go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is on it." The Watchers were forced to watch as their children, the giants they had fathered, were slaughtered. Their pleas for mercy were denied. They had corrupted God's creation, led humanity into sin, and produced abominations. Now they would face eternal consequences. The New Testament makes several references to this event. 2 Peter 2 verse 4 states, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment." The Greek word translated as hell here is actually Tartarus, the exact same term used in the Book of Enoch for where the Watchers were imprisoned. Peter is directly referencing the Watchers' story. Jude goes even further, explicitly quoting from the Book of Enoch. In verses 6 and 7 he writes, "And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day." In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. Jude is drawing a direct parallel between the sexual sin of the Watchers and the sexual sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, suggesting that both represent a crossing of boundaries God established, a mixing of categories that should remain separate. Then in verses 14 and 15, Jude directly quotes 1 Enoch. "Enoch, the 7th from Adam, prophesied about them. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone, and to convict all of them of all the ungodly acts they have committed in their ungodliness, and of all the defiant words ungodly sinners have spoken against him." This is a word-for-word quotation from the Book of Enoch, showing that the early church considered this text authoritative enough to quote in Scripture. Here's what makes the Watchers' story so significant. It's not just about what they did wrong. It's about the contrast with what was done right. While the Watchers were being judged, the archangels were teaching Enoch. They showed him the movements of heavenly bodies, the cycles of seasons, and the systems God had created. This was authorized knowledge, science that brought Enoch closer to God, not further away. The difference wasn't in the content, both involved celestial knowledge. The difference was in the source, the authority, and the purpose. The Watchers acted without permission, driven by lust and selfish desire. They taught humanity to manipulate spiritual forces for personal gain, leading to occultism, violence, and separation from God. The archangels acted under God's command, driven by divine purpose. They taught Enoch to understand God's creation, leading to wisdom, righteousness, and a closer relationship with the Creator. This distinction matters. The Book of Enoch isn't anti-knowledge, it's anti-rebellion. It's not warning against learning, it's warning against the corruption that comes when we seek power and knowledge apart from God's will. The story of the Watchers provides a supernatural explanation for the origin of evil in the world. Unlike the story of Adam and Eve, which traces sin to human disobedience, the Watchers' narrative places blame on rebellious angelic beings who corrupted humanity from the outside. This perspective was influential in Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. It explained why the world was so thoroughly corrupted that God needed to destroy it with a flood. It wasn't just human sin multiplying naturally, it was supernatural corruption introduced by rebellious angels who taught humanity things they were never meant to know. While the Book of Enoch isn't considered canonical scripture by most Christians today, its influence on biblical theology, angelology, and our understanding of spiritual warfare cannot be overstated. The Watchers remind us that rebellion against God, whether human or angelic, carries consequences. That forbidden knowledge pursued for selfish purposes leads to corruption, and that the line between enlightenment and deception is often determined not by what we know, but by why we seek to know it and from whom we learn. The Watchers fell because they abandoned their post, pursued their desires, and corrupted God's creation. Their story stands as an eternal warning. Some boundaries exist for our protection, and crossing them, no matter how appealing the promise, leads only to darkness. As the Book of Jude reminds us, and the angels which kept not their first estate but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day.